My name is Madison Carter, and I'm 28 years old. Last week, my parents showed up at my Silicon Valley office demanding $5 million from the tech company I built from scratch. The same parents who refused to pay a single penny for my college education because I was just a girl who'd get married and waste her degree. The irony, they're now claiming they deserve half my success because of their emotional support and life lessons. But what they don't know is that I've been planning this moment for 10 years, and their greed is about to expose the darkest family secret that will destroy everything they've built. Before we dive into this wild journey of family betrayal and ultimate justice, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments below, and if you're ready for a story that'll make you question everything about family loyalty, smash that like button and hit subscribe, because this revenge tale has more twists than a pretzel. Factory. Trust me, you won't want to miss how this family drama unfolds. Growing up in suburban Phoenix, I always believed my parents, Robert and Linda Carter, were the epitome of success. Dad owned 3 auto dealerships across Arizona, and Mom managed the family's real estate investments. Our 2-story house, with a perfectly manicured lawn, screamed middle-class prosperity, but behind closed doors their values were stuck in the 1,950 seconds. The first crack in my perception came during my junior year of high school. I'd been accepted into Stanford's computer science program with a partial scholarship, but I still needed $30,000 annually for the remaining costs. When I approached my parents with the acceptance letter practically vibrating with excitement, their reaction crushed my soul. Madison, honey, Mom said, not even looking up from her real estate magazines, college is a waste of money for girls. You'll just get married, have babies, and forget everything you learned. That $120,000 could be better invested in your brother's future. My younger brother Jake, who was barely passing his sophomore year and spent most of his time playing video games, would eventually receive full funding for his mediocre state university experience. The double standard was so glaring it physically hurt. Dad supported Mom's decision with his usual machismo. "Women don't belong in tech anyway," he declared over dinner. "Look at your mother. She's perfectly happy managing properties. That's women's work. Leave the real business to men." The conversation that truly broke something inside me happened 3 weeks later. I'd been researching student loans and work-study programs, desperate to make Stanford happen. When I presented my financial plan to them, showing how I could minimize their contribution to just $15,000, Dad exploded. "You ungrateful little brat," he shouted, slamming his beer bottle on the kitchen counter. "We've given you everything and you're still not satisfied. You want to throw away good money on some feminist nonsense degree that'll never get you a decent husband?" Mom nodded approvingly. "Your father's right, Madison. Look at the Patterson's daughter. She went to college, got all those fancy ideas, and now she's 30, divorced, and working some dead-end job. Is that what you want?" That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to them laugh and drink with their friends on the patio. They were celebrating Jake's acceptance to Arizona State, with a full-ride promise from them while my dreams were being systematically demolished. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound. The final insult came when I overheard Dad bragging to his golf buddies about how smart he was for not wasting money on his daughter's education. "Women just use college as an expensive way to find husbands," he laughed. I told Madison to get a job at the mall and find a nice boy to marry. Save everyone the trouble. I made a decision that night that would shape the next decade of my life. If my parents wouldn't invest in my future, I'd build one so spectacular they'd regret their choice forever. But more importantly, I'd uncover the truth about why they really refused to help me, because even at 17, I knew their reasoning didn't add up. Working 3 jobs during my senior year, waitressing, tutoring, and cleaning offices, I saved every penny. I applied for every scholarship possible and took out maximum student loans. The day I left for Stanford, Mom handed me a $20 bill for emergencies with the most patronizing smile I'd ever seen. "Remember, honey," she said, "when this little college experiment fails, you can always come home and help me with the real estate business." That's steady work for a woman. Dad didn't even say goodbye. He was too busy planning Jake's investment portfolio with money that should have been mine. Stanford was brutal those first 2 years. While my classmates worried about parties and dating, I survived on ramen noodles and spent every free moment either studying or working. My roommates' parents would visit with care packages and emotional support, while mine sent exactly 3 text messages my entire freshman year. The isolation forced me to develop an incredible work ethic and self-reliance, but it also fueled a burning determination for success that bordered on obsession. Every night I'd fall asleep plotting how I'd prove them wrong, how I'd build something so undeniably successful that their sexist assumptions would crumble. During winter break of my sophomore year, I came home to find Jake failing most of his classes despite having no financial pressure. Mom made excuses for him while Dad blamed his professors for being too hard. The hypocrisy was staggering. Maybe Madison could tutor Jake, Mom suggested over dinner. She's always been good with schoolwork. I looked at my parents with newfound clarity. This wasn't about gender or traditional values. This was about control and favoritism so deeply ingrained they couldn't even see it anymore. They'd rather watch Jake fail with their full support than let me succeed on my own terms. That's when I started digging into our family's financial situation using skills I'd learned in my business classes. What I discovered would eventually become the foundation of their downfall, but at that moment, it just confirmed my suspicions that everything they'd told me about money and priorities was a carefully constructed lie. The rejection wasn't just about college funding. It was about keeping me dependent, controllable, and small. They'd made a calculated decision to limit my potential because my success threatened their worldview. Little did they know they'd just motivated their own destruction. Junior year at Stanford marked the beginning of my transformation from desperate scholarship student to future tech mogul. I'd changed my major to a double concentration in computer science and business, working 80-hour weeks between classes, projects, and my 3 part-time jobs. While other students complained about workloads, I thrived on the chaos. Every challenge was practice for proving my parents catastrophically wrong. The breakthrough came during a particularly brutal semester when I was debugging code for a startup incubator project. My assignment was to create an app that could streamline communication between gig economy workers and their clients. Most students approached it as a theoretical exercise, but I saw a real business opportunity. Working with my lab partner, Alex Chen, I developed what would eventually become TaskSync, a revolutionary platform that used AI to match independent contractors with clients based on skill sets, location, and project requirements. Unlike existing apps that took massive commissions, our algorithm optimized for worker satisfaction and fair compensation. "Madison, this isn't just a class project anymore," Alex said during one of our 2 a.m. coding sessions. "This could actually change how people work." He was right. Our professor was so impressed that she connected us with her network of angel investors. By the end of junior year, we had our first $50, 0 inches seed funding and had officially dropped out to focus on TaskSync full-time. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was building a company designed to empower independent workers while my own parents had tried to force me into dependence. Every line of code felt like an act of rebellion against their limiting beliefs about women's capabilities. My parents' reaction to my dropping out was predictably explosive. Dad called me during our first investor meeting, screaming about how I was throwing away my education for some computer nonsense. Mom sent passive-aggressive text messages about how disappointed she was that I'd given up so easily. Neither bothered to ask what TaskSync actually did or how much money we'd already raised. In their minds, I was just another college dropout confirming their assumptions about women's inability to finish what they started. Meanwhile, Jake had switched majors 3 times and was on academic probation, but they continued sending him monthly allowances and making excuses for his lack of direction. The contrast was so stark it would have been comical if it wasn't my life. TaskSync's growth exceeded our wildest projections. By my would-be senior year, we had 1,000 active users across 5 major cities and had secured Series A funding of $2.8 million. Tech blogs were calling us the Uber killer and the future of freelance work. I was featured on Forbes' 30 Under 30 list at age 22, the youngest woman ever in the enterprise technology category. The success brought unexpected challenges beyond just scaling our platform. Media interviews constantly focused on my age and gender rather than our technology innovations. Male investors would direct technical questions to Alex, despite my being the primary architect of our algorithms. Every achievement was filtered through the lens of being a female entrepreneur rather than just an entrepreneur. These experiences only reinforced why my parents' attitudes were so toxic. They weren't just personally limiting, they reflected systemic biases that I was fighting against every single day in Silicon Valley. Their refusal to support my education had inadvertently prepared me for an industry where women constantly had to prove their worth. During this period, I made a conscious decision to cut contact with my family almost entirely. They'd shown no interest in my success, and I had no time for their negativity. Christmas cards went unanswered, birthday calls went straight to voicemail, and I stopped checking the family group chat where Mom shared updates about Jake's latest career changes and Dad complained about car sales. The emotional distance allowed me to focus completely on TaskSync's expansion. We opened offices in Seattle, Austin, and eventually New York. Our user base grew to over 1,000,000 contractors, earning an average of 40% more through our platform than traditional gig apps. We were solving real problems for real people while generating substantial revenue. Alex often asked about my family, concerned about my apparent isolation. "Don't you miss them?" he'd wonder during our rare downtime. I'd explain the college funding situation and their ongoing dismissal of my achievements. "You can't miss people who never really saw you in the first place," became my standard response. But truthfully, part of me was hurt they'd never reached out to congratulate my successes or even acknowledge that TaskSync existed. Local Phoenix newspapers had covered my Forbes recognition, but not a single word from either parent. Their silence spoke volumes about how little my accomplishments mattered to them. The turning point came during our Series B funding round. We were valued at $47 million, and I owned 35% of the company, making my net worth approximately $16.5 million on paper. The validation felt incredible, but it also triggered something deeper. I hired a private investigator to look into my parents' current financial situation. What I discovered was shocking. Dad's dealerships were struggling with debt, Mom's real estate investments had soured during the market downturn, and they'd been borrowing against their house to maintain their lifestyle. Most devastatingly, they'd spent Jake's college fund on a failed restaurant investment, leaving him with massive student loans despite their promises. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. They'd always had money for my education. Their refusal wasn't about financial limitations. It was pure gender discrimination wrapped in traditional values rhetoric. They'd chosen to risk their financial future rather than invest in their daughter's potential. Armed with this information, I made a decision that would define the next phase of my life. I wouldn't just prove them wrong about women in tech. I'd systematically dismantle every excuse they'd ever made for treating me as lesser. The little girl who'd begged for college funding was gone. In her place stood a millionaire CEO with the resources and motivation to expose their hypocrisy completely. TaskSync continued growing, but now I had a secondary mission ensuring my parents faced consequences for their choices. They'd taught me that family loyalty was conditional on gender and compliance. I was about to teach them that karma had a very long memory. 3 years later, TaskSync had become the third largest gig economy platform in North America. Our IPO was scheduled for the following spring, with preliminary valuations suggesting the company would be worth over $800 million. My personal stake would make me one of the youngest female tech billionaires in history, a title that felt simultaneously empowering and surreal. But success in Silicon Valley came with unexpected visibility. Tech journalists loved the narrative of a young woman disrupting male-dominated industries, and my story was frequently featured in business publications. It was only a matter of time before my family would discover exactly what I'd built while they were dismissing my computer nonsense. The moment arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in a board meeting discussing our expansion into European markets when my assistant interrupted with an urgent call. My father was on the line and he sounded desperate. "Madison, honey, it's Dad. I know we haven't talked much lately, but I just saw the article about your company in Business Week. We need to talk. Can you come home this weekend?" His tone was completely different from our last conversation 3 years ago when he'd called me irresponsible for dropping out. Gone was the condescending authority figure. Instead, I heard something that sounded almost like respect, though I suspected it was motivated by dollar signs rather than genuine pride. "I'm pretty busy, Dad. Maybe we could talk over the phone." "No, this needs to be in person. Family business, you understand. Your mother and I have been talking, and we realize we may have underestimated your potential. We want to make things right." The phrase, "make things right," was interesting considering they'd never acknowledged doing anything wrong in the first place. I agreed to visit that weekend, curious to see how they'd attempt to rewrite history now that my success was impossible to ignore. You know what's crazy about family dynamics? How quickly people's attitudes change when money enters the picture. If you've ever experienced someone treating you completely differently after discovering your success, hit that like button because this story is about to get wild. And don't forget to subscribe. You're going to want to see how this confrontation unfolds. The flight to Phoenix felt like traveling back in time. I'd purchased the house next to my childhood home 6 months earlier through a shell company planning to eventually reveal the purchase as a power move. Now it seemed like perfect timing for this reunion. Walking up the familiar driveway, I noticed the subtle signs of financial strain my investigation had revealed. The lawn was slightly overgrown. Dad's luxury car had been replaced with something more modest, and Mom's prized rose garden showed signs of neglect. The facade was cracking literally and figuratively. Mom answered the door with an enthusiasm that felt completely artificial. "Madison, oh my goodness, look at you. You look so sophisticated and successful." The word successful carried particular emphasis, as if she was testing how it felt in her mouth. Dad appeared immediately, wearing his best suit and the same fake smile he used for difficult customers at the dealership. "There's our little entrepreneur," he boomed, attempting a hug that I made as brief as possible. "We are so proud of what you've accomplished. We always knew you had it in you." The revisionist history was breathtaking. These were the same people who'd told me I'd never use a college degree, yet now they'd always known I had entrepreneurial potential. We sat in the living room where they'd originally rejected my college funding request. The same couch, the same coffee table, but the power dynamic had completely reversed. I was now the one with leverage, and we all knew it. "Madison," Mom began carefully, "we've been doing a lot of thinking about family and success and how we all support each other. We realized that maybe we didn't handle your college situation perfectly." "Didn't handle it perfectly" was a masterful understatement. They'd crushed my dreams, forced me into massive debt, and dismissed my potential based entirely on gender. But I let her continue. Dad leaned forward, adopting his serious business posture. The thing is, sweetheart, family is everything. And when one of us succeeds, we all succeed. Your achievements reflect all the values and work ethic we instilled in you growing up. I almost laughed at the audacity. Values and work ethic you instilled in me. Like when you refused to pay for my education because women don't belong in tech. They exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mom jumped in with damage control. Oh, honey, that wasn't about not believing in you. We just wanted you to be realistic about the challenges women face in male-dominated fields. We were trying to protect you from disappointment. Protect me from disappointment by ensuring I'd fail before I started. Dad's temper flared briefly before he caught himself. Look, Madison, we may have made some mistakes, but everything we did was out of love. And now look how well you've done. Maybe struggling made you stronger. Maybe we did you a favor. The "we did you a favor" angle was new. They weren't just rewriting history. They were positioning themselves as architects of my success through their neglect. The psychological manipulation was impressive in its shamelessness. So, what exactly do you want? I asked directly. Mom and Dad exchanged another look before Dad cleared his throat. Well, the dealerships have been going through a rough patch. Competition from online car sales, you know. And your mother's real estate investments hit some snags during the market uncertainty. We're not asking for charity, Mom added quickly. We're talking about investment opportunities, family partnerships. You could buy into the dealerships, help us modernize, maybe add some of that tech innovation you're so good at. The proposal was remarkably transparent. They wanted me to bail them out financially while framing it as a business opportunity. No acknowledgement of their past behavior, no genuine apology, just a calculated attempt to access my wealth. How much are we talking about? I asked. Dad's eyes lit up. Well, to really modernize all three dealerships and expand Mom's real estate portfolio, we'd probably need about $5 million in capital investment. But think of the returns. And keeping the money in the family? $5 million. The same amount they could have easily afforded for my college education but chose to spend on their own lifestyle and Jake's failures. The symmetry was almost poetic. That's a lot of money, I said slowly. I'd need to see detailed financial records, business plans, market analyses, full transparency about where every dollar has gone and where it would go. They agreed enthusiastically, probably assuming I was negotiating rather than gathering evidence for my real plan. Dad started talking about Carter Family Enterprises and how we could build a dynasty together. I listened to their fantasies while mentally calculating exactly how I'd expose their hypocrisy. They'd spent years teaching me that family loyalty was conditional on compliance and gender roles. Now I'd show them that their definition of family could be just as conditional, specifically conditional, on treating all children with equal respect and support. The weekend ended with promises to review their proposals and consider the opportunities. They had no idea they'd just walked into a trap 10 years in the making. Back in Silicon Valley, I assembled what Alex jokingly called my revenge task force, a team of forensic accountants, private investigators, and business analysts whose official job was conducting due diligence on my parents' investment opportunity. Unofficially, they were gathering evidence for the most satisfying family reckoning in history. The financial records Dad confidently provided painted a picture of breathtaking fiscal irresponsibility. The dealerships were hemorrhaging money due to poor management decisions, including a disastrous attempt to corner the luxury car market during an economic downturn. Mom's real estate portfolio consisted primarily of overpriced properties purchased at market peaks and vacation rentals in declining tourist areas. But the most damning discovery was Jake's true academic and financial situation. Despite receiving over $180 0 inches family support, more than 4 times what my college education would have cost, he'd graduated with a 2.1 gigapascals in communications and was currently unemployed living in Mom. and Dad's guest house while finding himself through expensive hobbies. Your brother got a $250,000 education to become a professional disappointment, Alex observed while reviewing the financial documents. Meanwhile, you built a $1 billion company with student loans and spite. The investigation revealed even more disturbing patterns. Every major financial decision my parents had made prioritized maintaining their social status over building genuine wealth. The luxury cars, designer clothes, and country club memberships had consumed money that could have secured their retirement and supported both their children's educations. Most shockingly, I discovered they'd refinanced their house 3 times to fund Jake's various entrepreneurial ventures: a failed food truck business, an abandoned app idea, and most recently a cryptocurrency trading scheme that had lost $45, 0 inches, 6 months. Each failure was met with more funding and encouragement, while my actual success remained unacknowledged until it became impossible to ignore. During this investigation period, my parents called weekly with updates on their business plans and increasingly transparent attempts to guilt me into investing. Mom had started sending articles about successful family business partnerships and photos of other families who'd supported each other through challenging times. Dad's approach was more direct. "Madison, time is running out here. We need to move quickly on these opportunities or we might lose everything. Is this really how you want to treat family?" The emotional manipulation was textbook narcissistic behavior, creating artificial urgency, threatening consequences, and positioning their financial problems as my moral obligation. They'd learned nothing from their past treatment of me. They'd simply adjusted their tactics to accommodate my new status. 3 weeks into the investigation, my private investigator uncovered the smoking gun that would make my revenge plan legally bulletproof. Hidden in the dealership's corporate records was evidence that my parents had been systematically underpaying their female employees for over a decade, including promoting less qualified men over experienced women and offering inferior benefits to female staff. The discrimination wasn't limited to me. It was a pattern of behavior that affected dozens of women. Several former employees had filed complaints with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that Dad had settled quietly to avoid publicity. My parents weren't just sexist toward their daughter. They were running discriminatory businesses that actively harmed women's economic opportunities. This discovery transformed my personal vendetta into something much larger. I wasn't just seeking revenge for their treatment of me. I was potentially exposing systematic gender discrimination that had damaged numerous lives and careers. Alex grew concerned about my level of obsession with the investigation. "Madison, you've already proven them wrong by succeeding. Why not just refuse their request and move on?" But he didn't understand the deeper principle at stake. "This isn't just about money, Alex. They're trying to rewrite history and position themselves as supportive parents who deserve credit for my success. If I let them get away with that narrative, they'll continue treating other people the same way. They need to face real consequences." I'd also discovered that Mom had been telling her friends and neighbors a completely fabricated version of my college years, claiming they'd provided emotional support throughout Madison's educational journey and that my success was a family effort. The lies were as infuriating as the original rejection. Meanwhile, TaskSync was approaching our IPO date, and media interest in my story was intensifying. Business journalists loved the rags to riches narrative, but I'd been carefully controlling the details about my family background. Soon, I'd have the platform and credibility to tell the complete truth. The final piece of my plan fell into place when I learned about my parents' upcoming 25th wedding anniversary party. They were planning an elaborate celebration at the Phoenix Country Club, the same venue where Dad had bragged about saving money by not funding my education. The guest list included everyone who'd witnessed their dismissive comments about my potential over the years. I decided to attend the party and deliver a speech that would expose their hypocrisy in front of everyone who mattered to them. But first, I had one more surprise that would demonstrate exactly how dramatically the power dynamic had shifted. The house purchase next to their property was about to become public knowledge. I'd also quietly acquired a significant stake in Dad's biggest competitor, a dealership chain that was aggressively expanding throughout Arizona. Between my tech success and my strategic investments, I now controlled more economic power in Phoenix than my parents could have imagined. 3 days before their anniversary party, I called to confirm my attendance. "I'll be there," I told Mom, "and I'd like to give a toast. Something about family success and the importance of supporting each other's dreams." Mom was thrilled. "Oh, Madison, that would be wonderful. Everyone's so excited to meet our successful daughter and hear about your amazing company." Our successful daughter. The possessive pronoun was revealing. After years of dismissing my potential, they were now claiming ownership of my achievements. The toast I was planning would clarify exactly who deserved credit for my success and who deserved blame for trying to prevent it. The anniversary party would become the stage for the most public family reckoning in Arizona's social circle's recent memory. They'd taught me that family loyalty was conditional. I was about to demonstrate that respect was equally conditional on how you treated people when they needed you most. The week before the anniversary party, I executed the first phase of my public response plan. TaskSync's IPO launched with unprecedented success, opening at $34 per share and closing the first day at $52. My net worth officially crossed into nine-figure territory, making me the youngest woman to ever achieve that milestone in the Arizona business community. Local media coverage was extensive, and I strategically granted interviews to Phoenix's largest newspaper and television station. Unlike my previous media appearances, these interviews focused specifically on my Arizona roots and the unique challenges I'd overcome to build TaskSync. Building a successful company requires tremendous family support and belief in your vision, I told the TV anchor, choosing my words carefully. "I'm grateful to everyone who invested in my potential from the very beginning." The interviewer, clearly expecting a heartwarming story about supportive parents, asked about my family's role in my success. "They taught me invaluable lessons about perseverance and self-reliance," I replied truthfully. "I learned early that you can't depend on anyone else to believe in your dreams. You have to prove yourself through actions, not words." My parents watched these interviews with growing excitement, apparently missing the subtle implications of my responses. Dad called immediately after the TV segment aired. "Madison, you were fantastic. We're so proud to be your parents. Everyone's talking about our successful daughter." The possessive language continued to be fascinating. After years of being the daughter who dropped out, I'd suddenly become our successful daughter whose achievements reflected well on their parenting. 2 days before the party, I delivered my masterstroke. Through my shell company, I purchased the building that housed Dad's primary dealership and immediately announced plans to convert it into a tech incubator for female entrepreneurs. The business press loved the symbolism. A successful woman creating opportunities for other women in the exact location where her father had built his traditional automotive business. Dad called in a panic. "Madison, what the hell is going on? I just heard you bought my building. We need to talk immediately." "Dad, calm down. It's just a business investment. We can discuss lease terms after your anniversary party. I'm sure we can work something out." The power reversal was complete. He was now the one desperately needing my approval and financial cooperation. The man who'd refused to invest in my education was now entirely dependent on my goodwill for his livelihood. The anniversary party was held at the Phoenix Country Club's main ballroom, decorated with silver and white flowers and attended by over 200 guests. These were the same people who'd watched my parents dismiss my potential for years. Family friends, business associates, and neighbors who'd heard Dad's speeches about women's proper roles. I arrived wearing a custom Armani suit that cost more than my parents' first car, driving the Tesla Model S I'd bought specifically for this evening. The symbolism wasn't subtle. Every detail was designed to demonstrate how completely I'd exceeded their expectations and limitations. Madison, oh my God, you look incredible, Mom gushed, immediately introducing me to everyone within earshot. This is our daughter, the CEO of TaskSync. She's worth hundreds of millions now. The pride in her voice would have been touching if it weren't so transparently self-serving. She was basking in reflected glory from achievements she'd actively tried to prevent. Dad's approach was more strategic. Madison, I'm so glad you're here. Listen about that building situation. Maybe we could discuss a family partnership arrangement. Keep everything in the Carter name, you know. We'll talk later, Dad. Tonight's about celebrating your marriage. Throughout the cocktail hour, I mingled with guests who'd known me since childhood. Their reactions were fascinating studies in cognitive dissonance. Many remembered my parents' dismissive comments about my college plans, but now they were eager to take credit for always knowing I had potential. Mrs. Peterson, their next-door neighbor, was particularly memorable. I always told your mother you were special, Madison. I could see that entrepreneurial spirit even when you were little. This was the same woman who'd nodded approvingly when Mom explained why college was wasted on girls just 5 years earlier. When dinner was served, I was seated at the head table between my parents, perfectly positioned for maximum impact during my speech. The dinner conversation revealed just how thoroughly they'd revised their own memories. We always supported Madison's ambitions, Mom told the table confidently. We taught her to be independent and self-reliant. Look how well that worked out. Dad added his own revisionist history. The tech industry is tough, but we raised Madison to be tougher. We knew she'd succeed if she really applied herself. Jake, now 25 and still unemployed despite their massive investments in his future, sat quietly while his parents celebrated the daughter they'd rejected. The contrast was stark and painful. Their golden child had failed despite every advantage, while their dismissed daughter had exceeded every possible expectation. As dessert was served, the country club's event coordinator approached our table. Mr. and Mrs. Carter, we're ready for the anniversary toasts, whenever you'd like to begin. Dad stood up, tapping his champagne glass for attention. Thank you all for celebrating 25 wonderful years with Linda and me. Before we cut the cake, our daughter Madison has something she'd like to share. The room fell silent as I stood up holding my champagne flute. 200 guests looked at me expectantly, including business reporters I'd personally invited to witness this moment. My parents beamed with pride, anticipating a heartwarming tribute that would cement their narrative about being supportive parents. Thank you, Dad. I do have something I'd like to share about family success and the lessons we learn from the people who shape us. I paused, looking around the room at faces I'd known my entire life. Some were genuinely happy for my success, others were clearly calculating how to benefit from my wealth, but all were about to witness the most spectacular family reckoning in Phoenix society's recent memory. When I was 17 years old, sitting in this very country club, I heard my father explain to his golf partners why investing in daughters' educations was a waste of money. Tonight, I'd like to tell you what I learned from that conversation, and others like it. The room's energy shifted as guests sensed this wasn't going to be the expected celebration. Mom's smile flickered uncertainly, and Dad's face began showing the first signs of panic. My 10-year plan for justice was about to reach its crescendo. Ladies and gentlemen, I continued my voice, carrying clearly through the suddenly tense ballroom. My parents taught me the most valuable lesson anyone could learn about success: that you can't rely on anyone else to believe in your potential. When I was accepted to Stanford's computer science program, they refused to contribute a single dollar to my education because, and I quote, "Women don't belong in tech, and college is wasted on girls who'll just get married." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Many guests had heard my parents' sexist comments over the years, but hearing them repeated in such a public forum created an uncomfortable reckoning with their complicity in those attitudes. I raised my hand for silence. They invested over $180, 0 inches my brother's education, and failed ventures while I worked 3 jobs and took maximum student loans to fund my worthless degree. Tonight, I want to thank them for that rejection because it taught me that success requires proving people wrong, especially when those people are supposed to believe in you unconditionally. Dad started to stand, his face red with anger and embarrassment, but I gestured for him to remain seated. Please, Dad, let me finish. After all, this is about family lessons. Earlier this week, my parents asked me to invest $5 million in their failing businesses, the exact amount they could have easily afforded for my education, but chose to spend on maintaining their lifestyle and funding my brother's mediocre pursuits. They've decided I owe them financial support because of their emotional investment in my success. The hypocrisy was so obvious that several guests actually gasped. Mom's face had gone white, and she was gripping her champagne glass so tightly I thought it might shatter. But here's what makes this story truly special. I continued, pulling out my phone. I've spent the last month investigating their businesses for due diligence purposes. What I discovered was systematic gender discrimination at Dad's dealerships, including paying female employees 20–30% less than male colleagues for identical work and promoting less qualified men over experienced women. I displayed a tablet showing copies of EEOC complaints and settlement documents. These aren't just personal family issues. They're illegal employment practices that have harmed dozens of women's careers and livelihoods. The same attitudes that led them to dismiss their daughter's potential have been systematically destroying other women's economic opportunities for over a decade. The reporters in the room were frantically taking notes. This wasn't just a family drama anymore. It was a developing news story about workplace discrimination at established local businesses. So let me be crystal clear about what happens next, I said, my voice gaining strength. There will be no $5 million investment. There will be no family business partnership. Instead, I've purchased your primary dealership building and will be converting it into a tech incubator specifically designed to support female entrepreneurs, women whose potential might otherwise be dismissed by people who think success depends on gender rather than talent. Dad finally exploded, jumping to his feet. Madison, you ungrateful little careful dad, I interrupted. There are reporters here, and I have audio recordings of every conversation we've had about women's roles in business. Your next words could determine whether this remains a family embarrassment or becomes a federal discrimination lawsuit. The threat worked. He sat down heavily, understanding that his entire livelihood now depended on my discretion. As for the building lease, I continued, you can remain as tenants, but you'll be required to undergo sensitivity training, implement transparent pay equity practices, and submit to regular compliance audits. Consider it an opportunity to learn about treating all employees with the respect you should have shown your daughter. Mom finally found her voice. Madison, honey, please. You're embarrassing us in front of everyone. Can't we discuss this privately? Mom, you've been telling your friends that my success was a family effort and that you provided emotional support throughout my educational journey. Tonight seemed like the perfect opportunity to clarify exactly what kind of support you provided. I turned to address the room directly. For anyone wondering about family loyalty, let me explain what I learned. Loyalty isn't automatic based on blood relations. It's earned through actions, respect, and support when people need it most. My parents taught me that family love is conditional on compliance with their values. Tonight, I'm teaching them that forgiveness is equally conditional on accountability for their choices. The room was dead silent, except for the sound of reporters typing and taking photos. This was going to be front-page news in every Phoenix publication by morning. In conclusion, I said, raising my champagne glass one final time, I want to toast my parents for giving me the greatest gift possible, the motivation to prove that women can achieve anything when they refuse to accept other people's limitations. Mom, Dad, thank you for teaching me that I couldn't depend on you. It made me stronger than you could have ever imagined. I drained my champagne and set the glass on the table. I'll be leaving now. The building lease documents will be delivered Monday morning, along with information about the employment law attorneys who'll be reviewing your hiring and compensation practices. Jake, you're welcome to apply for the incubator program. Like any other entrepreneur, assuming you actually develop a viable business plan this time. Walking out of that ballroom was the most liberating moment of my life. Behind me, I could hear the explosive conversations beginning as 200 guests processed what they'd just witnessed. My parents' social reputation would never recover, their business practices would be under federal scrutiny, and their attempt to profit from my success had been publicly demolished. 3 months later, TaskSync was valued at $1. $2 billion. I'd been featured on the cover of Forbes as the Phoenix Rising, How Discrimination Fueled a Billion-Dollar Empire, and my parents' businesses were operating under court-ordered oversight following multiple discrimination complaints. But the sweetest revenge wasn't the money or recognition. It was knowing that every woman who benefited from our new incubator program would achieve something my parents once believed was impossible. So here's my question for all of you. Have you ever had someone doubt your potential based on who you are, rather than what you could do? How did you prove them wrong? Drop your stories in the comments. I love hearing about people who turn dismissal into determination. And if this story resonated with you, smash that like button, subscribe for more stories about karma and justice, and share this with anyone who needs motivation to overcome family doubts. Thank you for watching my journey from rejected daughter to successful CEO. Remember, the best revenge isn't just success. It's using that success to create opportunities for others who face the same discrimination you overcame. Until next time, keep proving the doubters wrong.